All right. Welcome into the Logan Ward Show here on a Wednesday morning. Recording this on Tuesday night. The college football rankings have come out tonight. We'll react to that. We'll react to Rivalry Week, which was pretty intense. Again, I said last week on the episode that this year's college football playoff has been, in my recollection, maybe one of the craziest ones that we have had. And these playoff rankings in the last couple of weeks before we get into the conference championship games this coming weekend, there's no exception with that. There is a lot of teams that are still in it, and you could feel that on Rivalry Week. There were teams that were trying to knock people out of the playoff contention. There were teams that are trying to stay in playoff contention. And this year, it felt like Rivalry Week really kind of went off. And a lot of teams went off on each other. And we had multiple fights and multiple scrums. And I kind of have the feeling, because a lot of people are going to sit there and say, and I've seen it already on social media, we talked about people like, this is not how we should act. That this isn't how college football players should act. That they should be better sports. And while I understand that if I was anybody who was a part of the Ohio State-Michigan game, if I was a member of the Ohio State University, Michigan University, if I was a active party in one of those melees or those fights, yeah, I don't necessarily want my teams involved in a fight. I don't want my university involved in that sort of stuff. But for people who are just watching the game, let's not act like that wasn't good for the sport. Let's not act like all we have heard about this quote-unquote generation is they are too soft. That's what people say. This generation's too soft. They're friends with each other. They don't actually have real rivalries. Well, when things happen like this, then we say, well, they didn't show good sportsmanship. This is great for college football. This is great for rivalries. I find it kind of funny, and again, when you are in this situation, when you are there as a broadcaster, Gus Johnson was sitting there saying that this is kind of disgusting and that this isn't great and this is a bad look for both universities. But Fox played a promo to start the game talking about the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State. And all of the clips that they are using are them fighting, of them hitting each other, of them not liking each other. So we can't act like this isn't good for the sport. We're talking about this kind of stuff. And I have a solution. I think that flags are going to be banned. I don't think that that's going to be a thing. I think the NCAA is going to come in and say, no, commissioners, Big Ten commissioner, the SEC commissioners, y'all are going to have to fine teams and schools that do that. I think that that is coming. That will be something that is addressed this offseason. But how about you just don't let your rival beat you at home? This Michigan-Ohio State game was a perfect example of a team with the backs against their walls. Rivalry game, it meant more to Michigan. And Ohio State, who reportedly has a $15 to $20 million roster this season, has one of the best rosters in college football, got beat by a JV Michigan team who had a walk-on quarterback and two defensive stars hurt. A top 5 pick in their defensive back, top 5, top 10 NFL draft pick, he was out. They have a walk-on quarterback in Columbus, and they beat you. Maybe don't let that happen, and they won't come plant the Michigan flag and midfield. Same thing with North Carolina and NC State. Sorry, Tar Heels. How about you just win? You have to know as a coach, hey, if we lose this game, this might happen. It's a rivalry. Florida State happened there. I think that all of those happened in the morning. Those happened earlier in the day where it didn't affect Texas A&M. But if it didn't, I'm sure there would have been Texas players wanting to go dance on the A&M logo in midfield. But for all the people who are upset about this, who say, well, they need to show better sportsmanship, this is what college football is. Again, Gus Johnson saying that this is not how we want to end the game. This isn't right. But Fox shows replays of fights throughout Michigan-Ohio State's rivalry throughout this time. That every promo video talking about the heated rivalry, there's always hard hits, fights, punches thrown, melees. There's always that involved in those videos that your company promotes because it's good for the sport. We care. We want to watch it. We think that's interesting. And that is what college football is entertainment. And it was entertaining. Fox didn't cut away from it. Why not? Because you want to see the car crash. You want to see the fights. You want to see these things. So, can we quit acting like this is that big of a deal? This is good for the sport. And I don't think there's any way around that. This is a good thing for the sport. All right. That's just my little tidbit on the rivalry weeks. Okay. Let's get into Ryan Day. Because no one had a worse weekend in all of sports than Ryan Day. Losing for the fourth straight year to your main rival, again, who has a new head coach, has never been the head coach before, has a walk-on quarterback, multiple defensive stars hurt. This is a JV Michigan team. This is probably the worst Michigan team that they are going to field in a decade. They had the most players drafted in the NFL last season. And this is a rebuilding year for Michigan. To have them come to Columbus and for you to not be able to score more than 10 points, man, not a good look. And Ryan Day is supposed to be an offensive guy. He's supposed to be the offensive guru. And yet, can't get it done against Michigan at home. Will Howard, they went out and spent this money to get Will Howard from Kansas State. Doesn't look any better than Kyle McCord did. Hasn't looked, I don't think that he's looked great this season. It was decent against Oregon, but I don't think that Will Howard has been great this year. Kyle McCord has played pretty well at Syracuse. But Ryan Day not being able to beat Michigan, I know that this has been a conversation throughout this week and after Saturday's loss about could Ryan Day be fired after this season. I don't think that's going to happen, mostly because I think it's like a $34 million buyout that they would have to give Ryan Day not to coach him. And at this point, who's better? Is there anybody really lined up that you think is going to do a better job than Ryan Day? Because Ryan Day has everybody in the Big Ten figured out. He pretty much has everyone figured out except Michigan. And when he gets into bowl games, he's 1-4 against Michigan in his 5 years as the head coach. Other than that, he has like 10 losses. He wins 86% of his games. Now, in the bowl games, he's 2-4. They did have a really close game against Georgia. couple years ago, if they would have beaten Georgia, who had that stack roster, they would have played TCU. You probably like your chances, Ohio State, TCU, that Ohio State wins the Natty. Couldn't get past Georgia. I think Ryan Day is a decent coach. I think sometimes he wants to prove things. He sets out to prove things, and that can come back to haunt him. And I think that this Saturday was a good example. He wanted to prove that they could run the ball even though they have all of the weapons on the outside. So I think that Ohio State is in a little bit of a pickle. And people say, well, they have a true national contender team. I think that they do to a certain extent. I think that I would take Texas. I would take Oregon again. I think that I might take Penn State in a rematch. I think that this loss for Ohio State is going to be devastating. I think that this is going to be debilitating. I think that when the offense doesn't get going, I think there's going to be a lot of doubts setting into these offensive players. I don't think that this is going to be a rallying cry. Let's be honest, they haven't looked good this season. For a majority of this season, Ohio State has had some moments, played well against Oregon. That was a great game, but they have had some opportunities where you look at it and you're like, man, this is a pretty close game in the third quarter. Why haven't they put them away yet? That's happened a lot with Ohio State. They've played with their food a little bit this year, and they played with their food way too much in the loss to Michigan on Saturday. So I do think that this could be a pretty devastating loss that could have ramifications coming into the playoff, because we know that they're going to get into the playoff. That's pretty much a given. But do they have to go on the road? Depending on the seeding, are you going to have to go to Notre Dame? What's that going to look like? Or go on the road to one of these other schools? I think that's a real possibility for this Ohio State team. But if you're Ohio State, you're the athletic director, you're the chancellors, you're the Board of Regents, you look at this team, you look at this program, and you have to say, okay, Ryan Day, he has won 86% of his games, can't win that one against Michigan, which hurts, but who do we have to replace him? Are you going to get an unknown coach? You're going to try to get a coach from one of these group of 5 schools? Mike Vrabel's not coming through the door. He's not coaching college football. He's not doing it. I don't think that Vrabel doesn't want to recruit. He doesn't want to have to negotiate a NIL deal with an 18-year-old. He doesn't want to do that. Vrabel is not that guy. So Mike Vrabel's not coming through the door. Who do you have? Who is going to be your replacement? That's what I would ask if I was Ohio State fans. If you want Ryan Day gone, you got to replace him with somebody. So who's that going to be? Quite frankly, I don't think anybody's walking in the door that's going to win as much as Ryan Day. You just got to figure out why he can't beat Michigan. And that's pretty much it. All right, quickly, I want to touch on a couple of things in the NFL. San Francisco is a fascinating organization to me. And I say this as someone who is a Cowboys fan, that although the 49ers should get credit for what they've done, they've gone to a couple Super Bowls here recently. They just went to a Super Bowl last year against the Chiefs. Went to a Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Chiefs. They've got to a Super Bowl against the Ravens with Jim Harbaugh and Colin Kaepernick. It is an organization that has been to NFC title games, that has been to Super Bowls. I find it interesting that even though that is the case, they have gone to those heights and they have been close. They still haven't won a Super Bowl since 1994. And it's an organization that has a lot of history with the Cowboys. And the Cowboys are a laughingstock of the NFL a lot of the times, or at least they are someone that a lot of NFL fans like to poke fun of because they haven't been to an NFC title game. They haven't won a Super Bowl. You're talking about reliving the glory days of the 1990s. The 49ers haven't won a Super Bowl either. It's actually been longer. It's been a longer drought since the 49ers have won a Super Bowl than the Cowboys. And I am not sitting here just to say that the 49ers organizationally is kind of on par with the Cowboys. But what I find interesting is just because of some of the postseason success that the 49ers have had, I think that we give them a pass. Sports media members give them a pass for sometimes how bad they can be. And we do not hold the 49ers to the same standards that we hold the Cowboys to. The Cowboys right now, 5-7. They have been decimated with the injuries. They've lost their starting quarterback for the year. They don't have a run game, and I know that is part of the personnel issues that Jerry himself put upon it. But defensively, they have been hit with the injury bug all season long. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence has missed time. Trevon Diggs, Deron Bland have missed a lot of time. There have been some injuries for the Dallas Cowboys. It's been an injury-laden season for them. But as we sit here today, on December 2nd, we are, 12 weeks into the season? 13 weeks into the season? And both the Cowboys and the 49ers are 5-7. And both of the franchises seem like they're probably stuck right now. The Cowboys paid Dak Prescott. You're going to have to deal with that contract for the next couple of years. Have to figure out what you're going to do with Micah Parsons. But this 49ers team, they have a lot of question marks going into this offseason. They're 5-7. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. Yes, they could possibly still win that division. They're only 2 games back of Seattle, so there is theoretically a way that they could win the division and get into the playoffs. But you just lost Christian McCaffrey again on Sunday Night Football. Don't know. He has the PCL tear. I don't know if they've put out the timetable of him going to be back. But we have to admit now that Christian McCaffrey, he is an injury-prone guy. And you just gave him a deal. So what is he going to look like? He already had an extended time off this offseason. They said he might be ready to go by week 1. He didn't play for the first 8 weeks of the year. So you already have that you're going to have to deal with. Now he has a PCL tear. Deebo Samuel doesn't look like the same guy that we saw a couple years ago. Brandon Ayuk, you just gave him a contract extension, a massive contract extension this offseason. Tears his ACL. Don't know what he's going to look like coming back. Had a slow start to the season before the ACL tear. George Kittle, amazing player. Still one of the best players in the league. Can block, can catch. I think George Kittle's still rocking and rolling. He is in his prime. And then you have a 36-year-old Trent Williams who's dealing with the tragedy in his family, lost his twins, and has been dealing with some injuries. And when Trent Williams is not in the game, that offensive line is a completely different unit. And you have to factor in that at 36 years old, he's not going to play that much longer, especially as a left tackle. You have to factor that in. Fred Warner getting older. The defensive side of the ball, Joey Bosa, or Nick Bosa. What is that going to look like in 2 years from now? And then the big question mark this offseason is, what do you do with Brock Purdy? And Brock Purdy has not played bad this year. He hasn't been great, but he hasn't been terrible. All right, he's 5-6 this year when he's played. He missed that one game. He's played 11 games. He's only thrown 13 touchdowns and 8 picks. 65% completion percentage. So, hasn't played great. Haven't had the weapons around him. But you have to make the decision this offseason if you're going to pay him or not. I would wait another year. I thought the Cowboys should have waited another year with Dak and just let him walk at the end of the year instead of extending him in the offseason, and I think the 49ers should do the same. They should let this one play out. See what you have. Just let it play out next year. Maybe a couple players are healthy, and you can see what you have in Brock Purdy. But I don't think that you can give Brock Purdy $60 million a year right now. Because once you do that, you're essentially tearing everything down to the studs. You're going to have to rebuild everything if you decide to pay Dak the $60 million that he's going to garner. I don't know if he's going to get it on an open market, but that's what the agent is going to give, and that's what the top of the market is saying. Some team's going to have to say, no, we're not paying that, and maybe it's the 49ers, and maybe Brock Purdy goes somewhere else. Maybe they pay him. But if you're the 49ers, that's what you're going to have to work with this year and next year. What does Brock Purdy look like? Are we going to extend him? I think that the 49ers are in trouble right now. They are in a very similar boat as the Dallas Cowboys. And I know that 49ers fans don't want to admit that you are right there with the Dallas Cowboys in the same boat. You have a decent, not great, not top 10 quarterback, a decent quarterback that you're either going to have to pay, you're going to have to get a new quarterback, or you're going to let him walk and try to figure it out. And there's a lot going on with Brock Purdy and this 49ers team. 5-7, they don't look good at all. Sunday night against the Bills was rough. And I knew that it wasn't going to be a great game for the 49ers. I wasn't expecting the 49ers to win that game, especially with the snow. I did not expect it to look like that. They looked bad. And they have looked bad in stretches and portions throughout this season. Special teams has been bad this year. They've had some close games. But this 49ers team, you're a lot closer to the Dallas Cowboys than you want to admit in terms of what you've got going for you and what your future is going to look like in the next couple of years. Very similar trajectories. All right. That's going to do it for us here today. Be sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you are watching on YouTube, or if you watch on Apple Podcast or Spotify, you can watch the video. Actually, if you want, you can do listening or you can do video. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. You can get some shorter clips of the podcast in itself. This one, a little bit shorter of an episode. Well, we're about 25 minutes of an episode, so hopefully it's a quick thing that you can listen to. Be sure, subscribe, spread the word. That's the best thing you can do to try to get this thing going, is spread the word. We'll be back next Wednesday. And hey, also follow on social media, Instagram at Logan B. Ward, TikTok at Logan B. Ward. Going to do some videos and stuff like that on there. Conference championships in college football coming up this week. I'll predict those. And next week, I mean, we know the playoff format and we know the teams are going to be playing. So this time next week, I think we should know that bracket. And we might go through that bracket and kind of break that down. Give you who I think is going to win the national title, depending on whatever bracket is and whatever happens in the conference championships this weekend. All right. I'll quit rambling. Be sure to subscribe. Thank y'all for watching. See y'all next time. Peace.